Hello.
Hello, how are you?
There you go. Oh, there you go. Okay. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too.
Oh, there's music in that background.
Yeah. So, how are things? I know we had our meeting, our administrative meeting. That went well. I know you wanted to follow up on some things on that this week. We also have some other things that I wanted to go over. You know, beginning of the year business, we have some things to turn over for the new year, like, for example, submissions, documents, and things like that. And I don't know if we want to do it like in a certain way this year, but we'll go over some of those things because there's some deadlines coming up soon, even though it's just kind of the start of the new year. So I just kind of hope, I don't know if other people are going to show up, but
Yeah. Adjacency might show up. I'm not sure if Enrici will. But I don't know. Hello.
Hello.
hi. Is that Ankit?
Hi.
Yeah.
Is this?
All right.
I can't tell.
Yeah. Anyways, yeah. So, welcome to the meeting. Happy New Year. Everyone had a good holiday. I know we wanted to take some time off just to rest and get ready for this year. So it's been actually an eventful holiday. Ankit and I have worked on paper, and that paper is due at the end of the month. So we're going, and probably will be pre-printed. So it'll be something that we can submit to one conference and then keep submitting to different conferences. And so that's sort of, I don't have a pipeline to share with you, although I could probably talk about it. But the idea would be, if you want to do a paper, you can write something up, do some work, and then we can figure out a strategy for submission. Usually pre-printing it is a good option to start with, so you have a copy for people to see. If there's a conference paper required, you can put it in that template and then submit it, and if it gets accepted, fine. If it doesn't, you still have the preprint. So we're working through that process now with that paper. There are other opportunities coming up for different conferences soon, so it's always good to kind of look at the channel. I think we use the I know we reorganized it a bit. It's the conference announcements or something. So it's good. Keep an eye on that channel, and we can, you can see where, when deadlines arise. So, all right. So let's see. Why don't first of all, do we have any updates that people want to give on their general outlook? I mean, I know Jesse wanted to cover some things about what we talked about in terms of organization and administration, but
Yeah, I can do like any general updates now. I do think I'll try to. There's not. Maybe having a slightly different structure to the meetings will be good in time ahead, but like I don't think there's really a lot of content right now to fill up a lot of different slots. Because I think in general it's good to have like our updates here and then specific discussion about ongoing projects that we could move forward at the start of the meeting, or if there's any big thing we need to work on at some point, like we did at different points in the middle or end of the meeting. But right now, I don't really have not a lot of like group things in the work in that sense. So I don't know. I can go first, but as far as like general updates, we can go now. If anybody wants to say anything.
yeah, go ahead.
Okay. My general update. That's right. I haven't really talked to the group in this year. I had a last week? I had a nice meeting with Bradly. Kind of just administrative catch up and planning about a bunch of things. And I think we'll go over that more later. but there was a sense of getting at somewhat of what our intentions are for this year, and really wanting to really include and incorporate certain opportunities to present, to write, to make a flash talk, to be engaging, and to create opportunities for involvement. A lot of discussion we've had has been very good, but also maybe kicking it up enough in certain things to have a specific, I don't want to say outcome, but at the very least, that's something that that's something that I'm going to be working on myself. I need to get a little bit sharper about some things, and there's been a lot of nice conversations, sort of, for those who are just checking out the lab for the first time or don't know about the lab. These meetings are sort of general meetings, but a lot of the discussions that happen are asynchronous to this meeting and in general. And like I've had a number of different conversations over the last couple of weeks with Avery, who's an active lab member, but not someone necessarily in this meeting. Also, Jenny from Plot Twisters. There's been some, and I'll go into that more later. But Jenny has submitted something to a graduate program, and we talked a little bit about the preprint process, because I suggested she might want to put some of her ideas into a preprint, and I'm interested in helping out with that and other things, but also just furthering the discussion of one thing to talk more about later too is I'm working on here's your deliverables that you can work for here in the lab, and this is kind of an accepted route to if you want to do with this different level of things. And so there's a lot of conversations that's been happening about what to do, what we want to do, what's going on. Personally speaking for myself, though, I finished a bunch of graduate applications in December, kind of the first major batch. Thank you, Bradley, for your continuous help with that. I had to have one of my recommenders nudge another recommender, because academic stuff, I think it's really important to understand that it's really not personal. People can love you legitimately, and just emails and time. So don't be afraid to it's very common to have people who forget about things. I'm not talking about Bradley. Bradley's probably the greatest person I've ever met about letters of recommendations, so thank you. But it happens, and it's just, don't be afraid to remind people about it, because most of the time they care a lot, and they just have a lot of other stuff going on. So that happened to me. Just real talk about that. But everything is now complete. I'm happy about that. I still want to do more of that. I had a beautiful time off of just not thinking about stuff. And then I had a few distractions this week. Were kind of unfortunate. And also COVID. I don't know everyone else's, but COVID in my immediate, I have never been around as many people that have gotten sick with COVID as this winter. And I'm kind of glad that I really kept to myself. I'm a little concerned in a big picture sense, because healthcare workers are really under duress and leaving at a very high rate. So if you can avoid taxing the healthcare system or the ER, I think that's a great thing to do right now. And also not getting sick too. But it's just, I'm very cautious right now, and I'm kind of just openly cautious, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that choice. So there's a little bit, it's tough because I'm saying that, but at the same time, like, other cool things that have come up over this time period is Avery has moved to Chicago. They are in Chicago, and Bradley is located in a place close to Chicago. So there's some discussion on a number of fronts. Like, I kind of wanted to go see Avery in Chicago anyway, and partly because of them, but also potential meetup with Bradley. And then some other people in the area and in and around the lab are also kind of considering if things stabilize which what does that even look like now? But potentially in the summer, there may be a convergence in and around the Chicago area of orthogonal lab stuff, which is really cool and fun to think about. I have had, outside of my travels to the UK, which was a bit risky and fun and cool, and in person, I haven't done anything in person, so that's kind of a fun thing to have think about. Um, but I've had a lot of downtime. It's been great. I've had a lot of thinking about things. I've had a lot of considering what I want to do. A lot of personal reflection for I want to do this to move myself forward as a researcher in this specific niche, and also like my mentoring project and a lot of the frontier map stuff, which are sort of I don't know what to call them, but a bit adjacent to uh, the things that will kind of help and further other research or researchers in a broad sense. And those are important to me too. And it's like, I want to make movement on all those things. So that's kind of a very broad update. In another group that I'm working with, I have some new responsibilities that are overlapping quite a bit with lab manager stuff here. And I'm looking into a lot of ways to use Notion and some other tools to further some project things. I haven't been able to implement a lot of that yet here, but I'm hoping this weekend and over the next week to actually get that happening. So I'm looking forward to that. All right, Arthur. Um, but those things are in the works, and I feel a healthy sense of ambition. I feel I feel like there's a lot of things that are uh, coming along. A lot of the conversations I've had with Bradley that we'll talk about later, and a lot of things people have been saying they want to work on this year in the lab. Um, I'm really excited about that, and I think there's going to be a nice evolution of things. So I think it's a very wide-ranging update over the last month, but I'll turn the mic over to anyone else who wants to say anything. Any other updates people have had they want to share over their break?
Hello, Arthur. How are you? Did you have an update for us? Or?
Hi everyone. No, I think that I have nothing to say. I'm just expecting that this year will be great. I'm very happy. I am very excited. Um, and I think it's this.
That's good. Yeah. And
Did all your finals and stuff go okay, or how's your did school stuff like? Are you still doing that, or are you kind of in a next semester or like a break period?
Yeah, actually I am on a break, but uh, on February, I think 7 February, we will return to the presential. So yeah, I'm very excited to do this too.
that's good. Thank you for the update. And this is Ankit, or do you want to give an update on anything you'd like to see in the new year?
Yeah, so my finals got over, and right after my finals, I basically shattered my phone. So basically, all the time after my finals, I just spent roaming around. First, I repaired my phone, then I had to repair my SIM card, then I had to repair the Wi Fi. So, like, that's how the entire time got spent. And in the rest of the time, I was just trying to write the paper and write the application. So, this is basically what I've done right after my finals till New Year, till
Yeah.
even now. But thankfully now, like all my repair work is done, and I can just focus on like the last parts of the paper.
Well, that's good. Yeah. Thanks for the update. Sorry to hear about your phone, and hope you did well on your finals, and maybe
Yeah,
it kind of makes up
that's
for
it.
it. But yeah, and we'll talk about the paper in a little bit. So that's good. I think we've given some good updates here. So the first thing I wanted to go through, like Jesse said, there are a lot of people who want to do things that are trying to do some sort of academic product or project. So we have a bunch of projects in the lab, and I know that sometimes it becomes unclear as to what the projects are. So, maybe one thing we talked about doing this year is to go through projects and give updates on a regular basis. So, there might be a project update on like the ethics, society, and tech area. There might be a project update on like, developmental AI and general AI, or, there might be a project update on machine learning and data science. So we'll have all these different updates, every once a week. We'll try to kind of highlight one thing a week and then kind of cycle through and, see if people have any project, they want to do something, if they want to target a conference, if they want to write a paper, working on a paper. It's always good to have those check-ins with people to drive forward the progress, because sometimes people forget about it or, put it off. So it's like it's kind of a motivator to work on it a little bit during that week to get something done. Yeah. So Jesse, do you have any thoughts about that, or?
Yeah, I don't know if you want, like, one thing too, like, you're using GitHub a lot more, and I would like there to be, I want to kind of get back to a bit of a timeline-centered view, just to give like all the deadlines. I don't think the one we have currently fits that right now, or has a good anything to show currently. But we do have the project board, and we can. I don't know if you want to. I wasn't quite sure if you wanted to like go through that at a specific point in today's meeting, or like to do that now versus other things. But
Yeah,
like, the project board is.
Why don't you show that now? Can you share your screen?
Yeah. All right. Let me. I think I just do it like this. Let's see here. Okay. Oh, did someone new join?
No, it was Arthur.
Okay.
I just messaged in the chat.
Yeah. So Ankit says, for projects, I think we should get a bit more messy with the code and the vision than other things that would happen automatically. So you mean like hands-on sort of stuff, like demos and things like that, or?
Yeah. I'm just saying, like, if we are initiating a project and someone wants to work on it, then the one who wants to do it, then he or she should like start getting like a bit messy and with the code, and then also have like a vision of where he wants to take it. Then I think then you'll be able to actually like move forward with it, other than it just being in your list of projects that you want to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think kind of creating sort of a more project-based focus, and even just how we discuss stuff is good. And it's kind of hard to give the context for how things were at the end of last year, because we've had so many things that were kind of like I don't want to say harvest, but like things that have been worked on for a long time that we kept presenting, like NeuroMatch, with exception to a few things. Well, there were some new things, but a lot of NeuroMatch's older stuff, a lot of the cognitive science stuff was stuff that had been in the works for a long time. So that I think this will be a good season for sowing a lot of new seeds and kind of encouraging that process again. We haven't really, that's been a major focus in the lab at different points, but for now, this is kind of we can go back. This is the GitHub project board. Can I just, I'll do this in here. I'll do a pro style Bradly link in the chat drop for those curious. Which is, that's like elite style. Okay. Now my page might look a bit different because I do have ZenHub, and I really like the overlay. I'm kind of making some explanations of how to use ZenHub and why it might look different, but kind of just to kind of go on, just to go through this board for the time being. It's set up this way for now, but kind of like set up immediate. There's sort of an immediate urgent deadline that's happening collection of things, stuff that's active but maybe not set to a deadline, call for involvement in inactive stuff, and then maybe done archive. And oops, I hit this. Okay, so things that are immediately working on right now, and I don't know if we want to go through. I guess we can quickly go through all these things if you want to do that, Bradley, or what do you have in mind for this? Or
I think we can go through. Yeah, we can go through because this is the first time we're really reviewing the board. We can go through each item, make sure we know.
yeah, I'll start with this. I know this one here is basically just a lot of things that I'm doing for. Probably should this be this probably should this is the main one actually, all the onboarding materials for the lab. But you can see a lot of them here, and I'm not saying everyone has to use this GitHub this way, but I think it's a nice, cool way to do it. Like I'm basically making a task list and linking some other issues here, and I'm making some videos and tutorials how to do this if everyone wants to do that. You don't have to do this. You can either just ask me to do it or find a way to do this. But like I think it's a cool way to kind of structure some stuff. But an overview of the lab administration stuff right now that I'm working on is I did a really basic preview for the
I think I have like a small suggestion. I feel like maybe like we should, for like right now I don't know did anyone like pay for the Slack Pro? Is it like free?
Oh, the Slack Pro is like a demo
Yes.
for
It's
the month.
a demo, right?
Yeah.
So like I think like if we like take a subscription for like all the members of an app, like let's say Miro or let's say Trello, I think that would be really good for everyone because like especially I was looking at Miro, like it's really great for like real time collaboration and like it also has Kanban, it also has your integration with GitHub, etc. And maybe even Slack. So I think that can really help for like real time collaboration.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know like what the cost structure is for like a subscription, but I don't. I would shy away from the subscription services for now. Maybe if we get some money for it, like that we can, because if you have that as many people as we have in our group, it's a bit. It can be a bit much. Plus, I guess I would say like maybe if we want to have a set of tools, we can just make the list of tools. We can put together a stack like we've done this before with education. And then, if there's a good service where everything is integrated and we can afford it, then we can migrate to that. But I mean, I think the sort of thing about that is, maybe we approach this by thinking about the stack that we want. What things do we want to use that are good for collaboration? Do people want, to have like and then we make this public. I know Jesse has a list of resources. So, do we want to have like a dedicated set of, we have this is a Kanban board here. Do we have a dedicated sort of Jamboard or Miro board that we want to use for things? So people might feel comfortable, sketching things out or, having virtual sticky notes. So this is something that we can. Like, it would be good to have, like, if you want to do this thing, if this is your mode of interaction, then this is the tool. And so that might be good, too, because I think a lot of people, like when I collaborate with Ankit or Jesse or Arthur, we're using different things, it seems like. And some of that is because people feel comfortable using it. But other times it's just because it's something we pulled up in our one-on-one collaboration. So I don't know. I think I could use standardization there. So
yeah, and also like there's that we're trying to basically be open source about a lot of things, and there's a lot of tool creep and try to how do we kind of have consistency about it. I think one of the things that I'm trying to do is sort of standardize some. The things we use mostly in the lab right now are Google, Google Suite and Zen and GitHub as sort of means to collaborate. But I think, it's sort of like, there's also sort of, from a lab manager's perspective, an interesting part of this conversation is there are people who are going to be heavy users of these things and people who just are not going to. And having sort of a strategy for people who want to do a lot of different amounts of it, kind of a gradient, maybe basically different levels of involvement in how much people want to do stuff. Because a lot of people are not going to be using even GitHub, which is a fairly basic thing here. Basic, but also highly involved, and like it's not really intuitive at times. So it's sort of balancing all of that and sort of saying, yeah, people want to use a tool, that's great. If people really want to massively adopt a tool for a project or a set of projects, I think that's something that we can talk about and really work how to integrate that into it. But it's sort of like, how do we maintain some coherency and all the eyes looking at the same thing versus integrating new stuff. I think that's always like an ongoing, basically what Bradley said. And yeah, those are good points to bring up in that sense too.
Yeah. So why don't we go over the board here quickly?
Yeah. So back to the board. This is sort of my macro project as lab administrator stuff right now. I did a generic video for the lab, just kind of my first take on the beta products, and it's tough because like in the old boards, the projects were a little bit differently about some things. I'm gonna close this. I think I have a lot of Discord noise in the background. Anyway, I'm not like, I really like what they can do with the beta products, but it's definitely still in beta right now. And I'm still familiarizing myself with some of those things. I'm in the process of making a GitHub tutorial, and there's also a few other things that I'm probably doing on this that I'll just put here now. Actually, just kind of go through this. I have a deliverables document. And what else did I have here? Project presentations at the very least. Those are some other things that I'm adding to this list, and I'm kind of at various stages of progress in them. But this is sort of a main thing for now. This one here. Yeah, Brad and I talked a lot about this so far. I don't know if this particular presentation is that fleshed out yet, but kind of what we're looking at for one of the deliverables parts of it is kind of just looking at a lot of these things here. And we kind of mentioned this earlier in the meeting already, but like a bit of there'll be a presentation we're working on about the background and kind of background for oral, and then background for all of our projects and stuff. And there'll be some maybe different videos or about the roles you can take in a project, whether it's co-authoring or project collaboration, leading a project itself, or leading a team, and sort of larger scale project management. Like if you want to have a group of people on a specific thing, like that's part of development as a researcher or an academic or whatever. And being aware to how to contribute or have sort of like leadership or involvement at those different levels is a really cool thing. And it's great because I think this is one of the best labs that I've met in terms of just, you can have that right away. You don't have to necessarily, if you want to do that, you can shape that. And I think that's huge for a lot of people to get experience and exposure to those different roles. And then also specifically the deliverables about in-house presentations, in-house blogs, and that's a great way to just get your confidence or sort out some ideas, and then making them more external. There's articles. You can get talking about how to get invited talks to other places or discussion panels. Bradley and I and other people in the lab have had a lot of experience with that, and it's great. Event presentations, we kind of know about that, and then also conferences and manuscripts, and just kind of putting all that on the table, because sometimes people don't necessarily know or have a lot of experience in those things. But part of, I think, what we'll want to do this year in particular, and what Bradley's always done, if not just explicitly stated out, is getting people familiar with all this stuff and helping them do that. So there's going to be some content and some videos and some things along the way on that. And this is definitely open to, if you're interested in kind of fleshing that out or reviewing things, that's, you can mention it on GitHub or just anywhere in Slack. So those are kind of these two things. I know I don't know if this is the paper that you all are working on, but I know this is a paper here if you want to talk about this one.
Yes,
So
actually, yeah, I'll show in a little bit, but yeah, Ankit and I have been working on this switching paper over the break, and I think it's coming along well. So the idea here is to create this paper. This is the technical paper where Ankit develops this genetic algorithm, and we kind of go through the technical details and discuss it a little bit. And so this is something that's going to be submitted to a conference. And there's going to be another paper that's more theoretical in nature. And so this is almost to the point where we can submit it as a preprint. So this is in progress. It's made significant progress. There's still more work to do, but I like the way we kind of follow up on these issues. So this is. And of course, the issue's kind of changed its name, but we'll have to change that when we get the preprint out. And it says RL agent switching, but it's actually a genetic algorithm. So I don't know.
you want me to change it now, or
Actually, I think this one is actually a different idea.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Yeah. So the one that I discussed with you about that was my idea was that like we talk a lot about switching. So like so the one that we're currently working on, that's like a technical one that's related to genetic algorithms, obviously. Then I was thinking like have like a theoretical paper on entirely on switching.
Yeah.
And then you'll have RL agent switching will again be a technical thing that would be separate, and that would again use some of the principles from switching, but it would be related to reinforcement learning. So that's something probably later down.
Okay. All right.
okay. Would
But
this be maybe an
before,
active category then, or?
no, I don't think I'll be able to do that because I feel like at first maybe like we should work on that one we are working right now already, and like get out like a theory paper on entirely on switching theory, kind of like just name like universal switching theory or something like that, because that can also help for citations and stuff, and like uh, by that time I think I'll figure out some stuff also.
Okay. Yeah, I
Okay.
see. So 56
Is this
is
the one
Gecko.
currently?
Yeah, 56 is the one we're actually working on. 48 is the one that Ankit wants to make a call for involvement or kind of put it off to the side for now. So
Okay.
those are two, I guess they're related. And this is kind of a thing that, like, if we put an idea in here and then 2 months later, it's changed or we kind of change course, then, we should update it's sort of the scope of these issues. Like, these GitHub issues are made for, like, very specific coding needs. Like, add this line of code into a program. It's very specific. The way we use them is a bit different, where it's more conceptual almost. So that's a thing that I think we need to think about some, is just kind of how do we refine these issues and keep them like sort of trimmed down to something relevant, because and then so the Gecko issue will be solved, but it'll link back to say like the theoretical paper, and just keeping that up I think is a good, but rescoping the issues I think is critical too. So we'll have to figure out a way to do that more effectively.
Yeah, I'm kind of looking into some other things like I don't think Obsidian's going to work for that specifically, but yeah, more
This
about
is
that
something
later.
you put in Slack, yeah, the Obsidian.
Let me go back now to my thing. Yay. There we go. Okay, cool. Was there any more about the paper or papers that you wanted to say? Well, I mean, I know you talk about more later, but like for
Yeah.
the going over the board sense.
No.
Okay. All right. As far as the only other immediate stuff, I don't think there's much here. Oh, I did write a little bit. Oh no, I thought I wrote a little bit of a description here, but I guess it's not here. Basically, this is about. I really thought I wrote a description someplace. I don't know where it is. Basically, I'm working with my undergraduate university to establish a pathway for some students there to get experiential learning credit by doing some things in our lab, like a semester-long credit. It's only available to students at that university, so it's a bit limited in that sense. But it's a cool project, and I'm hoping to flesh out. It's kind of dependent on some of the other things we're doing. Like I want to have some onboarding materials, and I may mention like going over some of the internship, other prospective roles people could have, or like just people can do whatever role they want, but like specific like almost job descriptions kind of things. So that is definitely in the works. I'm going to try to get that up as soon as possible. Kind of all of this stuff for me is sort of like urgent. So yeah. For active things that aren't being tailored to our deadline, I don't know if anyone wants to say anything about the organoid review stuff, or if that's where that is.
I think it's Arthur, but that's also Morgan. So I don't know where people are on that. Do you know anything about that, Arthur?
I don't know if there's much here yet.
Yeah.
No, we didn't start to work on this yet, but we are planning to start, I think, this year. I'm curious about what we can do on this part, because it's not very clear for me what I have to do. I think that we need to discuss on Brain Organoids chat about this, and how can we improve this organoid review. What I am doing is basically I am using the Tissue Talks shared docs that you created, Bradley, and I'm improving that with a lot of knowledge that I am saying on YouTube, like lectures of PhDs and things like this. But I think that we will start this organoid review this year.
Okay, that's good. Thank you for engaging with the shared notes documents. That's always good. I think that'll give a good basis to some of the. So the review would be like, we have things in the Slack channel, and then we have like shared notes documents, and the idea is to somehow synthesize those things. And by a review, I guess, there's like the part of this that's like, what are we learning about organoids? But then there's also the part that's like, what is it that how can we contribute to this organoid area? So I guess the review that I would I would suggest is, first of all, maybe go through and outline some of the major themes in the notes and in the Slack channel. So if you go back in history, you look at the different things. What are the things that those have in common? Are there specific themes that emerge from that? And it's just looking at it and noticing, like they're like human, they're brain organoids, they're tissue organoids, they're different species that people use, they're different ways that people are using them. And then, kind of make a little outline of that. And then, and this is a group activity, this isn't just one person. And then, to try to, and I definitely recommend keep going through the shared notes document, because I think that's also valuable. But in the review outline, then you would kind of lay out what we've found in the literature, and then kind of decide what is it that the lab can do that's unique. Because, if you want to, say, publish this review, it's got to be something that's unique. It's got to be a contribution that, perspective that the lab has that other people don't. So, it's like maybe we see that there's like this activity across species or model organisms. and we want to focus on that. I talked to Maduri about this several months ago, but so if that's something that I don't think anyone's written a review on, that would be a good thing to focus on. And you can go check in the literature to make sure no one's written a review on this. So that's, you always do that sort of thing. But if you just basically, go over the channels of notes and just kind of find the common themes, and then think about like what is it that we can focus on that no one else has really focused on before. And then that's pretty much that would make a really successful review, I think.
Okay. Thank you. We have a lot of papers and a lot of things in the Organoids chat. So I will start to work on this next week on Monday. So yeah, I will share docs in the chat too, and and you can review and talk to me what I have to improve or what I have to change, if I understood well what's needed to do. So is it okay?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would say also, like, if you ever want to have a discussion about, like, if you want to have a specific meeting with Bradly or me, I'm really not that involved in that, so I may not be the best, but like I know if you want like structuring like an annotated bibliography or other parts of review, like you're always welcome to just to ask for a specific meeting and maybe give some more. If things seem really nebulous or just like that, it just sounds like a bunch of words. Like we can really iron out some.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of experience doing this, so I will need some help. But I can start, and I can. Now I am on a small vacation, so I have a lot of free time to talk, and I would love some help with this.
Okay.
Yeah, it sounds good. Thanks.
I think that's this 46. This, I wonder if this should be in the on hold section, because this isn't quite active right now, I don't think. I haven't done anything with this yet, but it's on the docket. It's just maybe not active right now.
Well, I think this is something we've kind of come to a point where we, I don't know if you want to contribute to it. We haven't submitted it anywhere yet, but I know Rob, has time, and then he doesn't have time. So it's kind of like one of those things that, based on his availability, I've worked on it some. So we're at a state where it's in good shape. Another thing is we can recycle these issues. Like if we have this issue, if we are in a mode where we're editing it, then it's active. If we submit it somewhere, I guess it's still active. But then, there are new action items. Like if we submit it and people want reviews, then we have to make that we have to be able to differentiate between those things. I would just leave this inactive for now because we're.
Yeah, I'm kind of on the fence of like in Zen Hub this would be like and this isn't quite like there's some merging, but like this is kind of be an epic ultimately. This would be a whole project. This wouldn't just be a single issue.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like it's a little bit blended right now, and I'm trying to refine that a bit more. But like, there's specific tasks like review this thing or add this thing to an annotated bibliography, and then like a macro. Like this is a true. Like the onboarding materials is a whole like set of things, and then this is maybe a subcomponent of that. Yeah. And it's I'm not sure they're really going to be perfectly differentiated, but yeah, okay, we'll keep that here.
Okay.
But this is a cool paper, and I think this is something we can. I'll put that on my list of things to finish. Let's say, just to move along. I don't. It's already. I don't want to spend too much time here, but we've talked about the switching paper already. Any more you guys wanted to say about that one? Or
not right now. We'll do it after we're done
here. Is this something anyone's? I don't know if this is much here yet. Yeah, this is sort of something I would like to do, but maybe might not have time to do. But just mining, I don't even know if I wanted to work kind of with Charlotte on that. I'm not sure if Charlotte could fully attend that event. So to be continued about this one. I
Yeah.
might lower this on a little bit. Um, let's see. Switching Google Summer of Code stuff. I think that's pretty much active now. We'll hear more about that later.
Yeah, we'll go over that later.
The Frontier Methods map that is also active. I am working on that manuscript quite maybe not extensively, but like there's a lot of work being done on that, and it's slow and whatever, but it's there. Um, this one, Meta RL for implementation and allostasis machines. Uh, was this something that came up with? I don't remember how this one came about.
This is something that Rashab wanted to do for, like, he wanted to do a new version or add on to the version that we put out for the emergent workshop, emergent interaction workshop. And so this is Rashab. We've talked about this. It hasn't really gone anywhere for like about 6 months, but I kind of hope that we can see it through in the new year. And it's just a matter of like if you see a paper that like this is a preprint, this paper right now, and it was presented at a workshop. But if you see like somewhere where it can be improved, and we've talked about this for certain things where we might want to implement something, like the Gibsonian information. So this issue implementation of GI and agents. That's something that we've talked about in terms of informally in the Slack. The next one or two down from that, I think. That's one that we've talked about doing. Like, how would we implement this idea in an agent or in a model? And so that's another thing you can follow up on. So I don't know like the timeline for the previous issue, but it's something that we're kind of thinking about. And people are welcome to jump in and say, I want to talk about pushing this forward, especially if things have been lingering in this list for a while. It might be a good opportunity to sort of make it go forward because people will mention things and we want to keep those in a list, but we don't also sometimes have time for it or it doesn't work out on the first pass, but it doesn't mean that it's not worth doing. So
Yeah, and that's kind of like anything in this group is kind of like waiting for a little bit of momentum.
Yeah.
Like this, I some of these are much more. I think kind of like in the classic Zen Hub sense, there may also be like a what do they call it, an icebox for like things that just are kind of on hold indefinitely and maybe not currently seeking. It's like different. I'm kind of I'm looking for different ways to visualize this, like different ways of like stuff that's immediately urgent we have to focus on, stuff that's active but maybe not to a deadline, things that are kind of waiting for more leadership or more involvement or more of a critical mass to take off. This should probably actually be over here too. But like, and then stuff that's on hold and review in different ways. So again, this will be iterated upon and fleshed out a bit more.
Okay.
So does that cover both of these things?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
They're kind of trash right now. This is also kind of what's that?
At the moment, like how many boards do we do we have in this project board?
How many boards?
Yeah, like I think
Like
just
what do you
this
call
one.
it? Headings, what do you call
Cards?
it? Yeah, how many cards are there at the moment?
Looks like over 15.
No, I'm not
One.
cards. Like I meant the headings, like prepare for deadline, active, like that.
Oh,
How many of those are there in this board?
I think 4. I don't think there's anything to the
The
right.
4 main ones in a done category.
Okay. That's actually good. Okay. Because like I was recently looking at something called the Eisenhower Matrix, and it's really similar to this.
Yeah, the
Like,
urgent and non-urgent
yeah,
stuff. Yeah.
yeah. So like we could kind of organize in that manner probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so this we talked about this here.
Yeah, we did.
This I may move this out of draft at some point. I don't know. Um, did I say much here? Yeah, this is a cool thing. I'll just really quickly mention this. But it's sort of a markdown. You can do a lot of really cool looking things like get these maps and a lot of like stuff on the side. One of my big researcher nerd friends uses this, and it's cool to do. And there's ways to sync it with GitHub and externalize it. And they there's like paid plans for different things, but you can also just sync with GitHub and a lot of interesting stuff there. What was this one? Oh yeah, they have interesting timeline setup too. I kind of like this. You can make timelines that look like. Oh, this is the one I wanted to show. This is nice for like a particular timeline. There's also there's a different link I wanted to put there, but it's not there. But anyway, for later discussion, could Obsidian be a useful tool for keeping notes and potentially being accessible and potentially being something integrated with GitHub to be determined. And then this should probably be an issue, but the mentoring project that's starting to get a little bit of steam. There's some. I'll talk about this some other time, but there's some collaboration with Plot Twisters. I'm also actually I just mentioned it to Dr. Jennifer Goodall, who is I guess a colleague and a friend of mine at this point, but someone from my University of Albany, my undergrad, and who collaborated on a lot of things. And she's a major part of New York's celebration of women in computing. And I'm really curious what she's going to say about it, because there's a lot of overlap in some of her interests, and I don't know, she'll become kind of an advisor for her or something like that. I don't know what she's going to want to do, but I just started kind of revealing it to her, and I'm slowly making it more public and building steam with that. So I'm happy. This is definitely going to be something I focus on this year. That's sort of an adjacent, I don't know, professional development kind of stuff. So more about that to come. That's an update about this really quickly. This has been submitted. We're waiting to hear back. I guess that should be done. We're waiting to hear back from things at this point. I guess we're going to find out soon what's up with that. Yeah, that this is in the works, but on standby. Oh, I do want to put before I forget. I'm really gonna, just because I'm really gonna strongly look into this. We Robot 2022. That's something I'm really looking at. That's kind of related to this. The allostatic types preprint is related to the submission we've done for Neuromatch. I'm gonna send it. Yeah, anybody can, we're basically keeping things in admin for now, because it's just easier and it'll automate a bit more for some things. But related to Neuromatch 4, which is in 2021. Was Danielle on that? I don't know. But this is something that will happen. Avery's, settling in, but been working on this in upcoming months. So that's cool. There we go. What else we have here? This is a major older project, so it's kind of hard to summarize that. But I don't think anything's currently active on that front. But there's a lot that's been built upon the developmental Braitenberg framework we have.
Oh yeah.
And then a very old project from original Neuromatch Academy, the complexity feedback. That's still there. Maybe that's an Icebox project, but that's still there too. And put some more links to that. Danielle's interested in that. I'll put Rish on that because he asked to be put on that. I'm
Okay.
kind of disappointed. I thought it looks like some people don't have administrative access to this. Oh, it's because it's in NeuroMatch. That's a funny one anyway. All right. Anyway, I think that's it for uh, uh, this. I guess data trust maybe is more like a specific presentation, but that'll be coming up again too, and so on. But that's kind of a quick review of things. We can move on. I know we don't have a lot of time.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Well, thanks for that, Jesse. And I think some of these things, I think they'll like some of the projects are, sort of atomized from the large, or some of these issues are atomized from the larger projects. Meaning that like why
sharing, right?
what was that? No,
My screen
not
stopped
sharing.
sharing.
Yeah, it did stop sharing. So like Developmental Braitenberg Vehicles, what project is that in? Is it its own project? It might be its own project if people want to do it that way, but there's a larger initiative or project that it's a part of. So we usually do like groups. We have different websites that I've used in the past where we've sort of corralled things into groups like Ethics Society and Tech, or some like the representational brains and phenotypes, which includes a lot of the AI stuff that we do, agent stuff. And then, there are other little groups that we have, and then we have these little issues within them, which are the things that people have done. We've worked on little projects like that. So those are all kind of the way the projects are set up. And so in the future, we might try to do project reviews, or we go over maybe these groups and then some of the projects within them, some of the issues within the projects, and then we can kind of see how those things fit together. I think it's a good way to reevaluate, what we're doing, because sometimes we talk about these things like the issues here, and we don't think of the broader context. So it'll help us think about that as well. Okay, so that's good. I like this. Now I want to switch gears a little bit and go on to some things that we share some things.
Might have to do that. We don't maybe have to do that every week, but kind of just as a refresher where our projects are right now.
Yeah. We'll do, but it'll become like kind of a semi-regular feature, I think. So the first thing I wanted to highlight was this is Ankit wrote this article on our Medium. So we have this Medium blog that I've talked about, and we have different features on it. Like sometimes I'll recap the meetings and different conversations in the meetings, and I'll put together a post where we have these different topics. I think we've covered some of these. We also sometimes talk about different conferences that the lab has attended, go over some of the things learned from that. This is one of those in that category where Ankit has highlighted a lot of the talks he got to see in NeuroMatch 4 and the ones he found useful and interesting. So this is a recap of NeuroMatch 4, happened in December, and I think he goes through 12 or 13 different talks, and these are all on YouTube. And this is one from Ileana Jones and Conrad Cording, or Elena Jones and Conrad Cording, on this dendritic computing stuff that they're doing. Then there's a talk on deep learning models for biological vision. It's a pretty diverse set of talks, but he kind of goes through all you need to do for this is just to kind of have a list of these things. And then, we like to put screenshots in because the visual part of it's very important, so you can see kind of what the talk is about. You have a link here, the title, and then you have a short write-up of maybe no more than a paragraph. And if you did this for like a top 10 list, you would have a pretty nice long blog post here, as you can see. So this is nice. Thank you for this, Ankit. And I want to encourage people to do this more. If you want to do this, you can, what you do is you can contact myself or Jesse. I think you create an account on the Medium. You can then join our group, which is Orthogonal Lab, and then we have to approve the post. So you send us a draft, and then we can approve it and post it to the main Medium blog. Now, if you don't feel comfortable doing that, then you can just send a draft along in a Google Doc even, and we can review it and post it ourselves. That's perfectly okay. I just want to facilitate participation here. So that, we might do one on brain organoids at some point. That might be a good one to do. That might actually help clarify the review process. So, we talked about doing an outline. You might take that outline and get some images and put them in, fashion that into a post, and then that will facilitate conversation as well.
Yeah, I could totally see like a post, like you could do like maybe even this is just a freestyle idea right now, but like you could make a post that's fairly lengthy and like have a goal be at the end of the month you do like maybe a large review or an annotated bibliography of like some major topics within brain organoids, and you kind of go through those specific issues and link some articles and have a discussion about what those issues are, and that'll be a great post. That's a really nice like mid-range thing to aim for, and you could supplement that by having smaller presentations or discussions in the lab too. So I mean, I think that's kind of a nice way to shape things and think about stuff.
Yeah,
maybe not every project that way, but that's just to kind of trying to seed more options for things to develop in that way. I think it's good.
Yeah, and this actually got some buzz on Twitter, and we've got a couple claps here in the. You can clap for an article here. We got 4 claps, so that's good. I think that's a nice overview. And then if you look at the medium itself, I don't know where we go, how we do that.
I think click on the icon in the upper left of the orthogonal lab.
Okay. Yeah, let's do that. This one here.
Yeah, that one. So
this is the medium here. Oral notes, and we have Ankit's post. I posted the 2021 year in review, which is the presentation I did in the last lab meeting, which was I don't think too many people attended that. I don't even know if Ankit saw it. He was there earlier in the meeting. I think Aaron and myself were there when I did this, but this is just kind of like this is just kind of an overview of this. This just tells us what we were doing last year. So this is just like a recap of a lot of the different things. And then we have these posts on the, meeting recaps, and Jesse's posted a number of things. And so this is a nice opportunity for people to get writing. And we talked about practicing our writing, which I think is a very good skill. So this is one way to practice your writing. Another way to practice your writing is to write a paper. And this is something that Ankit and myself have been working on here collaboratively. And this is the genetic algorithm switching paper. So this is the version that we have now. We were working on it. Ankit provided a fair amount of work on this before, but this has been kind of organized with improvements to the methods and the figures and the front matter and everything. So we have a nice paper, I think. So, when you see a paper like this, and this paper is like 21 pages in this format, and we're going to reorganize it for like the Gsoc conference. We're going to submit a version of this. So, like a lot of this, we can make this into a preprint, and then we like kind of use an abbreviated version for that. But you say, well, this is a lot of work. This is pretty intimidating. The thing to remember here is that these papers are usually like, this is pretty far along in the process. So, instead of being intimidated by it, one way you can approach this is by doing basically an outline of a paper. So, the first thing you want to do is start with a good idea. And you want to outline your good idea into, this is something I really am interested in. And I think the switching thing was serendipitous. But I think, the idea to kind of pursue this came from that talk I gave on switching. And then Ankit said, oh, yes, this is a good idea. I have kind of a similar idea. And then we talked about, so now we have framed this in that context. and there's a lot of work here that's been done. So, you might say, I've done some work with some program, and I want to kind of work it into a research topic. Or you might say, I have this broad idea, I want to boil it down to this thing I can implement. Or, you might have an idea, you might develop a theoretical approach. All of those things require sort of an outline, and to kind of bring in what you have, and then kind of figure out what you need to accomplish to realize this. So you can see that there's a basic structure here. There's an introduction, there's then a methodology, there's a lot of methodology in this one. You don't need to have any methodology sometimes if it's a theory paper or like a review, but you want to kind of go through the methods if you use them, or in a review or a theory paper sometimes you will have an introduction, and then you'll have some topical subheadings where you kind of explore the landscape of this area, and then eventually, if you have a paper like this, you'll have a results section, which is somewhere in here. I don't know where it breaks, but and then a discussion at the end where you tie everything together, and sometimes future work as well, where you have like, well, how do we do it? Where do we go with this in the future? So this is looks very daunting, but it's really not. It's an outline. It's thinking, talking to people about.
It's about to be a little more daunting after the edits which I make.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah, I mean, but the idea here is iterative. It's, the references, again, you have to find references for in the literature for what you want to do. You usually do this to verify what you're doing is something other people have done. So, the rule I kind of use is if no one's done anything like this, it's probably not true. People have done things that are similar. And if people have done things that are close, pay attention to that and, kind of work around that. Say, well, people kind of address this issue, but there's an interesting sub-issue that they didn't really talk about that I'm trying to do. And so then you use that in like a literature review section, which is like in this area here.
Actually, like the ideas of switching to me originally originated when I was like thinking about like what would happen if I would apply reverse operations. So like after that I kind of like found a blog which is one of the references. There's like this research scientist who at Microsoft Research, he had actually like first you can say he had written a blog about this.
Yeah.
And he had used reversals in the genetic algorithm, but the idea was really similar, but it was like he hadn't implemented stuff like what do you call it, the stochastic reversals, and he hadn't really done like an analysis, like a wide scale analysis of like different algorithms, how does it compare. He had just done it for fun on like one particular algorithm, and just he had written a blog. So that's why I thought it's a good idea to pursue it.
Yeah, I think that's good. You read these things and then you say, oh, that's a good idea. And really the key is like finding different things in the literature, having different conversations, and then making that connection and saying, oh, I can add to this. That's really the key thing. And that's not something that is really, I think it's not taught enough when people talk about how to come up with good ideas and how to drive forward research, because that's what it kind of is. You read these things, people have these ideas that you can build on, and then they're just really stronger ideas. It's not just coming up with something de novo and that no one's ever talked about before. For one thing, it's very hard to kind of conceptualize what it should look like if no one's ever done anything before. But secondly, people really have kind of thought about things. If you think about something like, well, like this paper where we have these reversible operations, well, people have thought about it, but they've thought about it in a certain way, and so you can think about it in a different way, and it's really, people will understand what's going on because maybe they say, oh yeah, that's a good idea, and then you present your work, and then they say, oh wow, I never thought about doing it that way. because a lot of people will think about things like that, but they won't think through enough to say, how am I going to implement this? It's just kind of a passing idea. So definitely like framing the research and then finding sort of your niche in that, or something you can contribute that's different. So yeah, this is good, and we'll continue working on this and submit this out. And so that I recommend to anyone, if you want to start, don't be overwhelmed, start small. Just do the outline, work out the details, and then like things like the abstract and the title are sort of the last things you do in a draft. So you want to work out everything else first, and then you want to work out the abstract once you have things in place, and then the title. And don't worry about how snappy the title is, because it's that's not always necessary. It's it's flashy, but the work is the most important thing, the structure of the work. So that's good. So that's all I wanted to cover on that. And so next thing I want to talk about is the submissions. So Jesse showed the sort of the issues associated with submissions, but last year we created the submissions document. You've seen this before, about 70 entries on it. We have some things here from last year, and I think in 2022 I created a new tab for this. So we're going to start new with a fresh set of numbers, and we're going to clean this up a bit. So these are all the submissions that we have here. I guess I'll add the New York Celebration of Women in Computing here. This was a deadline
I was going to say
last
that.
year. Yeah.
And the Wii Robot one too.
Yeah. And so this will be something, again, we can track. And I don't know if we want to integrate it with the boards or anything, but I think some of these things I just wanted to have a place where we can have the deadlines for each thing and then to review them, because I know that we think like March 1st is a long time away, but it's really not. It's like 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And if you need to have like a paper in place by then, that can be pretty short. If you have an abstract, maybe it's not that short, but you still want to plan these things out. So but yeah, I mean, this is I prefer to keep like a very simple spreadsheet for review purposes, and then we can also have like a more formal set of tasks associated with them. We can also review them, but I want to make sure that we have a place we can put together a quick list of hits, and then track their progress. So
yeah, like it'd be good to put a link either to an issue or to a paper in the link section.
Yeah. Like associated issues or something. Like that, yeah. And then we can put those in, and that'll help people sort of. It's a one-stop shop for that. Yeah, so that's that. And there are things like Gecko. They have the abstract deadline and then the paper deadline. Cogsight 2022 is coming up at February 1st is the deadline for that. So we might miss that. I don't know. We might do something for it. It's hard to say. A-Life 2022 is actually something I want to target. And I have a couple ideas for that, and I'll talk about them maybe next week. But these are things that are, again, this is like an 8-page paper. They also have extended abstracts of 4 pages. I don't have the website for that up right now, but you can look it up on Google, and I might talk about that, go over that more next week on what we might do for that. Like I said, I have a couple things that I'd like to submit. And then if people want to be involved in one's a revision of a paper we did last year, and the other one's a new paper, but that's something we can talk about. So I think that's good on that front. And, again, there are deadlines coming up already, so good to keep on top of that. So I want to
Yes.
talk next. Yeah, I want to talk next about Google Summer of Code. So this year is a little bit different. We talked about the program being different in terms of being more flexible, in terms of timeline and in terms of projects. And so I have a couple of ideas here on this list. This is the Gsoc project list. And one of the things we might do this year, and I don't know yet, I haven't made a decision on this. Oh, I have made a decision. But we have this ability to either go through INCF and just list the projects on their board, or we can go on our own and say we're going to have an organization that has a number of projects under it that we can get INCF's recommendation if we want to have our own organization. So I was thinking of that because we have things in the orthogonal web, but we also have things in DevoWorm. I have 2 projects here. And then also something for Rockwire, which is something that I haven't been able to do because we don't have an organization that's suitable. So we might do an organization, and that involves like doing a application to Google, and then INCF would back us up on it. They'd say we've been participating in Summer of Code, or at least I have as a mentor, and I'm sort of in charge of this, so we would have our own organization. I know I don't usually talk about DevoWorm too much in this meeting, but DevoWorm actually might be doing 2 projects this year, or we'll be submitting them. The first one is graph neural networks as developmental networks. And so this is an interesting, I've kind of written this up. So there's this paradigm called graph neural networks. And the idea is we want to take those graph neural networks and create graph embeddings that resemble actual biological networks. And so this feeds into some of the stuff that DevoWorm has been doing with connectomes and embryo networks, which is a type of network that we use to analyze embryos and analyze nervous systems in the case of the connectome. But also we have this work that's been done on deep learning in the group. And we've done a lot of things with deep learning and pre-trained models and analyzing microscopy data. So we had a couple of projects in the past years where we've developed this platform called DevoLearn. So this is the preprint for DevoLearn. There's also something called DevoWorm AI, which is a collection of different techniques you can use to analyze biological developmental data. So, there are data sets mostly on embryos of different species. We have different algorithms that have been sort of tested. Wouldn't go as far as to say they were benchmarked, but they've been tested on different species and on different data sets. So we have that collection as well. And so this is something that I'd like to see. Usually when I post something on deep learning or machine learning in that area, I get a lot of people apply. So we'll see if we get applications of this. It's a little bit out there maybe, but the idea is to create a library of graph neural networks that can, maybe analyze or simulate developmental processes. So we'll see how that goes. There also have this project, Digital Microsphere, which is this idea of we have a collaborator in the DevoWorm group that has a special type of microscope that flips embryos over in a water column. So it gets pulled down and then it gets released in this water column and it rotates upward. And then while it's doing that, there are like 9 cameras on it that then take images from different angles. So the idea is we'll have this data that will basically cover the entire surface of an axolotl embryo, which is a nice model organism. It's a nice model organism which they use to kind of look at brain development. They look at neural development in the embryo. They look at other types of they study regeneration with that organism. So there are a lot of reasons to be interested in the embryo. And so this would allow us to have this unique data set that we can then map to a spherical model. And then that would allow us to build a model where we could explore the surface of this embryo in development. So that's something we posted last year. We got a few people to apply. We'll see if it works this year. Then the one for our group here is I think it's this AI ethics idea that emerged a couple weeks or probably a couple months ago now, and it's cybernetic tools for AI ethics. So I don't have this written out right now. I need to write it out, but I wanted to go through kind of what I thought we had and kind of things that I think between Krishna's presentation on feedback and auditing systems, there's an opportunity to come up with a proposal on, building some sort of AI ethics tool that would allow us to, look at like feedback, look at, maybe it's sort of an auditing system or different relationships between variables, and then framing that in terms of cybernetics. So, I think in the case of Google Summer of Code, there've got to be programming milestones or software milestones. So people have to create software for this. But to have a broader context, I think, is important. And I'm not sure with this new program whether we're going to have the opportunity to sort of have, like, if people can explore other issues during their program or not. But we'll see. I wanted to get some feedback, though, especially maybe from Jesse on how we might flesh this out, and I'll work on a description this week because it's due to, I think, from the 15th to the 30th we can post ideas. So I want to get this out soon. Jesse, have you thought about this? What are your thoughts about kind of a AI ethics Gsoc project?
Yeah, I'm definitely curious about that. I think I think I see what you're getting at, where you're going with it. I think it's definitely. I would like to. I'm a little bit unsure how to. I feel like we might have to pick a specific. For making the Gsoc proposal, I don't know if it's like you. I don't know how much I don't know how much leeway there is to say do this versus we'd like you to look into this and find something out about this stuff. Like, I don't know how structured it has to be, because if it has to be very structured, then I think it would it would basically just be taking something that already exists and making a slight modification and say do this, like taking some things that came up in like, I think about the Sarah M. Brown's work, because she did a lot of like implementing some kind of data science tools to verify certain things. Like, basically just saying what would you like, we could base, if it has to be very specific, you could say, well, look at one or two AI researchers. We wouldn't say this, but like, it basically be looking at a couple researchers or a couple papers, a couple things that are specifically done in this area and saying, okay, what would you do plus this or in addition? But if it's more open-ended, maybe I think that would be more accommodating for some of like the cybernetics feedbacky stuff, because I don't know how much. I would defer to you because I've never really structured a proposal for Gsoc before, but
Yeah.
I would want something that's viable and not like,
Well, yeah.
I would want it to have some traction as opposed to just being a kind of airy-fairy thing. So whatever the best version of that would be, that's kind of my impression or my initial reaction. I don't quite know what that is, and I don't quite know how much. Particularly with the new setup, I don't really know where the parameters or the what's inbounds and what's out of bounds for like a good project in that arena. So
Right.
as long as something's viable and we give people either a very direct path to how to write a software project about this, or if there's more wiggle room, then that's great too. So that's my first take.
I think like the initial structure that I think at the end of the day, maybe like you can suggest like a topic which is little bit more streamlined than open-ended,
Yeah.
because the first thing for you would be to get accepted as an organization, and
Yeah.
then probably anyone who's proposing their ideas, they can have their open-endedness. But the first thing would be to have something slightly structured, which like mentions like what skills are required, and like what areas or what topics would be required, like a little bit more how do you call it, a little bit more structured. And yeah, yeah, I think you
Yeah.
got my point, what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe one approach I've done is to give people data sets or things like that to work on. I don't know if that's, but I'll look into some of these tools. I don't want to reinvent the wheel with software, but it's like I think if we gave them like maybe well, I mean, we'd have a goal, but then one thing I've done is let people sort of have kind of come up with a solution to it, and so they would propose different solutions during the application period, and then I'd encourage them to apply, and then if you get like 10 people doing this, then you have they kind of work it out in terms of the structure, because they might have an idea and run with it, and it might be they might be very different things, but then you can evaluate the approaches and then see which one works best. But yeah, that's something that I think, yeah, well, I'll work on it this week and see if I can add more flesh to that. But I just wanted to go over that idea just to mention it. So this is something that'll be worked on this month, and then hopefully we'll have it submitted by the end of the month. And then once we have this a more solid description of it, we can start distributing it, and then seeing if people are going to be interested in doing it. I think there'll be some interest in it. And then people will, like I said, a lot of times I'll just let them kind of, give them some parameters. They'll come up with a solution. You'll say you can use a number of tools potentially to solve this problem. And people will be really creative about it. They'll, try different approaches. Sometimes they don't work very well. Sometimes they're very good. So that's how you would evaluate them once they apply. So that's the plan for Gsoc this year. I plan for the orthogonal lab directly, just one project. DevaWorm, which is sort of half associated with the lab, 2 projects, and then another, if we can do an organization, another project. And so that's, I think, the benefit of an organization is you have more control over how many slots you get. So you get more slots. And that's why I wanted to try for the organization, because it's, it gives you more leverage in terms of slots. But it's hard to say, like, what they'll do, because the last couple of years they've been a little, we haven't gotten the slots that we planned for, because they, have changed the sort of the criteria. And I think they're trying to remedy that this year, but we'll see. Okay, I think now we'll move on. I want to talk a little bit about the Slack. We're not going to do a Slack review because there was way too much that was covered over the holiday. But I did want to go into the Slack a bit and review some things here. The first thing I wanted to mention was that there's... where are we here? I think it was Angela who mentioned in... I don't know where she posted this, if it was in the general or not. But she's interested in doing some things with life logging. We were talking about this. We're actually talking about this.
Lab.
Which one?
Ethics.
Ethics. Okay. So, yeah. Okay. So she's trying to do this PhD research. She wants to start working on it, and she's interested in doing ethical AI. So this is ethical machines, I guess they call it. So this is an interesting area where you think about like an AI and how do you give it ethics. We'll talk about that in a minute. But I wanted to go over like her idea here, which is that is anyone here able to would be able to or interested in setting up life logging, so AIs could be created from it. Just a cursory survey. So I suggested that she would ask people if they wanted to do some life logging. And I don't know, we have two hearts here, Jenny and Jesse. So I guess if you're interested, we're trying to think through how to do a pilot of this. And the idea would be, I guess, is to get some basic data on life logging, or to set up. She knows how to do life logging. That's her area. But she'd want to basically have people log their lives. I don't know how you do that. But if you're interested, instant message her, contact her in the channel, and then we can get set up on that. And then once we get a couple of people doing this, then the next step would be to look at the results and do some other, I guess it would be used as a training set. I'm not really sure how. We're kind of walking through this procedure. I want to kind of provide her with a pilot study so that we can that she can see if what she's proposing is viable. So, if you're going to do a PhD, you want to be able to write, have an idea of what you want to do, but you also want to make sure it's viable. You don't want to just jump into it. So this would help her out. And again, I don't know exactly what's involved in life logging, but it's something that we'd want to do. That if you're interested, we can follow up on it. So we had a number of things in this channel in ethics. Aaron's been posting a lot of different stories.
Yeah, I know that Aaron actually is that log J stuff. How do you say it? She's writing. She's put together some things about that and kind of started a collection about that. I thought she actually might have been here today, but I guess she couldn't make it.
Okay.
But I think she's interested in working on some, either maybe starting with a Medium post or something else. But I think she wants to do some kind of a deliverable towards that. And also, I had a totally random question, just a quick one. Let's say it's yes or no to. Do you know, in terms of Europe? Because I know Angela's in Europe, and I know Jenny's looking at a European grad school, and I looked at a few things there. Europe versus the United States, are European, particularly doctoral, but graduate school programs often, or just sometimes, project-specific, project-based, compared to the United States, which maybe isn't as much?
I think that I don't think there's a huge difference in terms of projects. I know that Angela said in Germany they have this sort of student-led initiative where I don't know if it's it's not a program, you just find an advisor and that you can do an individualized thing. So I don't know the details about that though. But yeah, I think they may have that in Germany, but I think in general that you're always going to do you always be associated with a program or a department, and then you're going to do a project. And so the project, because a PhD is supposed to be a research degree, so it allows you to learn how to do research, and the project is a big part of that. So usually they have you'll do your coursework, you'll take an exam to see that you know kind of what you're going to get into, and then you do your project, and then you defend your project at the end, and then that's it. You get your degree. And the project, of course, can take a long time, which is why there's this notoriety about PhD project or PhD programs being really long. There's an ideal period of 4 years, but it can take much longer. But that's because your project is, you have to figure out a lot of things about that. So, but it teaches you how to do research, basically.
I think I'm a little bit not confused, but almost surprised, because my round of PhD applications that I just did were super, compared to, I think, Angela's stuff and Jenny's stuff. I've looked at some of their submission materials and stuff like that. There's here's a specific project, and the program's tailored to a specific, what is your project, what is your, I don't know how to say it, what is your almost creating a project proposal as an inherent part of the application explicitly, as opposed to something you could just say, oh, I'd like to work on this in the field. And it's it just feels I was actually expecting more structure. And there were things that I applied to in the past that were more structured. So I don't know. I guess I'm kind of in a state of like
Well, I mean, it's it's good to
disagreeing.
have an idea of what project you want to pursue, but the problem is sometimes they don't work out the way you hope, and so sometimes you have to change your project or you have to modify it.
Yeah.
But
Or
I mean,
like I'll see. Sorry.
oh well, in the U.S., you're applying to a program, so and sometimes like if you go to like a neuroscience program or a medical program, they do rotations, where you go through a bunch of labs and you figure out what you want to do from that. And you say, well, okay, there's this lab doing this project versus this lab doing this project. You might go through maybe 8 or 9 months in each lab to get a feel for what they're doing. And it's supposed to help you kind of get a broader appreciation for the field. And then you pick a project, and your initial project might change quite a bit from that. That's why I'm kind of, I know maybe in Europe or maybe some programs, they encourage you to do like a project or to
Yeah,
apply to one.
it's like I've seen a lot of instances where it's like we have a funded PhD for working on this very specific subfield. Like you're going to be doing computer vision on this project, and that's what your PhD is going to be in. Versus like everything that I applied to has been, it's sort of like either general like computer science or a specific subdivision of it. But it's just this is kind of taking more time than it should for the meeting, but like it's just been interesting to kind of see the differences, and then I guess I'm still kind of feeling like, oh, like I don't know if I was not structured enough on what I wrote, but I think it's just the program submission process have been different this year than what I've expected,
Well,
even compared to previous years of a lot of things. So
I think like sometimes like labs will have funding for people, and they'll communicate with the lab, and they'll say, I'm going to apply to this lab and this project, and so they'll have money there, and maybe they do that more in Europe, but you also will apply to a program, and sometimes it's better to just kind of get in. You'll have to apply to a program. Sometimes it's better just to have like the program, because you don't really know if like the lab is a good fit for you or if that project will pan out. So sometimes they do have like funded positions that you can apply to, and then you get into the program that way because they have a automatic slot for you. So it might work a little bit different in cases like that where they have like the funding built into some project. But I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how. But as far as I know, like if you're applying to a program, which you usually do, it's very general, and yeah. So I don't know. Maybe that. Yeah, I know Akshara applied to like a program in Germany, which she got into, which was like a lab, and they had a specific project, and so that was something that. But that was that's a case where you have a project in a lab that's sort of defined and funded, so that it's almost like a job. I don't know if you have to do a separate PhD, but I mean, my impression of PhD programs is that very thing with the applying to the program instead of a specific position. But
okay.
Let me share my screen.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, we have a lot of stuff in ethics, society, and tech, and we need to kind of talk to Erin more about because we talked about some of her ideas for. We talked about some things with the tragedy of the commons in the last meeting that we wanted to follow up on, and got to keep on top of that. So yeah, go through these citations. Cognition Futures had some activity over the break as well. There were some nice videos in here. The Johannes Jagger Beyond Networks. This is a brain-inspired podcast. I was listening to this. Some very interesting ideas in this podcast with respect to sort of biological complexity and philosophy and how people are approaching the brain and biology and things like that. So that's a good one. And then finally, the Brain Organoids channel, which has a lot of stuff, as Arthur mentioned. We like to put things in here. And again, I would encourage people on this channel to, when you're writing this review, to kind of go through and catalog these different posts. So, we have a lot of papers on utilizing graph machine learning with drug discovery. So those might not be directly related to organoids. This one is on growth and form of cortical convolutions. This paper is interesting because we had talked about this in the first time we tried to do something with brain organoids. We had talked about these cortical convolutions. And so cortical convolutions are these parts of the brain. If you notice in a human brain, the top layer is this neocortex. And there are a lot of folds in it. As you can see, you think about the human brain, you see this wrinkled mass on the outer edge. Well, not all animals have this. In mammalian brains, a lot of mammalian brains are smooth. Like in dogs or in cats or in other animals like cows or something. They have a smoother surface. It's in great apes and in humans in particular, you have these wrinkles. And these wrinkles are called convolutions. And the convolutions are really like where you have this cortical sheet that's grown over the top of the brain. And it's grown so much that it starts folding up because you have this constraint of the skull. And so while the head grows, scales with the body, a lot of brains in great apes and especially humans have been superlinear with respect to that scaling. So the head's growing, the body's growing, the brain is growing much faster. And this area of the neocortex is getting sort of wrinkled up and bunched up. It's kind of like if you took a piece of paper and you tried to fit it into a little small cup. You don't want to just shove it in sort of like with your finger. You want to wad it up so you can get the entire thing in there. And so this is why you have these convolutions, as they call them. Now, the consequence of this is that you take a lot of areas that aren't local. If you had a spread out sheet, they would be in different areas. They would be non-local. But when you fold it up like this, you actually get things that are adjacent. So if you, let me go to my board now. So these convolutions are interesting because you have, like I was saying before, you have this sheet, say. You can think of this as an array or like a sheet of paper. And you have these points on it that are sort of non-local. And you have this wiring between these points. So this wiring, there's a certain distance here that you have to travel to get from one point to another. Now in a cortical convolution or a wrinkled sheet, if you unwrinkle or if you have a wrinkled sheet, it looks like this, right? You have deformed this surface. You've crinkled it up, and now these points are actually different. They might be adjacent. So, if you had these two areas here, these 2 points might be this point and this point. Now you have a shorter path between them or a longer path, depending on how they get connected. And so it's basically bringing certain parts of the sheet into adjacency. So it changes the relationship between points. There's like a mapping between them. And this mapping changes with the convolution as you wrinkle up the sheet. Now, this is interesting because in organoids, we start with a sphere of cells that are undifferentiated. And as we grow this thing, it doesn't just grow in size as we add cells. The cells differentiate, and then there's this wrinkling that may occur. So I think, if you see like organoids, they look like this, and brain organoids look like this. Sometimes they wrinkle up, and this is a different process than the cortical sheet, but this is basically this ball, which is kind of taking on different shapes. And so, you can approximate this wrinkling in this context as well, where it's basically doing the same thing as the wrinkling, which is it's changing the adjacency of these points. So if you were to draw a graph of this, an adjacency matrix, which is basically this IJ, it's this WIJ thing where you have, one position versus another position. You have like 2 points, and you want to find like the distance between all these points. You would create a matrix W sub IJ, which is basically the distance between all these points. And this adjacency matrix is going to change depending on how this is folded up. So in this case, the adjacency matrix is one set of values, when you have cortical folding as another set of values. And then in an organoid, you might see the same thing, where you get this tiny ball of tightly undifferentiated cells. The cells start to differentiate, and then they start to form these geometric wrinkles, which then can change the relationship between cells. And we were thinking about modeling this at one point, where you go from a ball to a larger ball with different types of cells to this wrinkled structure where you have cells in different locations. The tissues might be differentiating at this point, but it changes this adjacency matrix. So it changes the relationship here, the mathematical relationship between these cells in terms of distance. And so that's an important thing to think about. In this paper, I think they talk about, they're really talking about the formation of neocortical folding, but it might actually be nicely relevant to brain organoids. And so there's this, there's this paper here on growth in form of cortical convolutions, and then this paper on, I think this might be like a news article on this. There's some work by Roberto Toro, who's a neuroscientist, and I talked to him after we presented on the developmental Braitenberg Vehicles. I think it was at the Twitter conference that we had a long time ago now. I think it was 2019. And he said, have you thought about taking your Braitenberg Vehicles and creating like these convoluted surfaces, like so you have these neurons within the vehicle. Did you ever think about making convoluted surfaces? And I said, no, we hadn't, but that's something we could follow up on. So what that means is that, like, if you know anything about our developmental Braitenberg Vehicles, we have this vehicle morphology, the wheels, the sensors, and then we have these interneurons here that we populate that link the sensors with effectors. So in a typical Braitenberg vehicle, you're just linking sensor to effector. In these developmental vehicles, you have this nervous system that's an intervening set of interneurons that are, appear in developmental time, get connected in developmental time. But you get this, basically this rudimentary nervous system. The idea here would be to have, like, I guess, a representation where you have this nervous system within the vehicle, a set of interneurons here, that instead of just being like sort of, I don't want to call them disembodied, because that's not true, but they're like sort of these interneurons that are just connected as this abstract graph, having them as sort of like a sheet, like a neocortical sheet, right, inside of this vehicle. And on the sheet, we have these points. And then, as the sheet, it starts out small and then it grows outward. And then as it grows outward, you get more cell interneurons. And then you start to fold the sheet as it gets to the edges of the inside of the vehicle. So it starts to fold and deform like this. You're trying to fit more sheet into the space. And so that changes the adjacency of these points. And so then you have a network that's actually deformed. There would be a curvature because this whole surface will deform. So then that's your relationship with the sensor and effector. It's not only with these interneurons, but it's also, the adjacency matrix changes between these different points. And so this is something that's interesting. I'm not really sure what it would do to these vehicles if you have this sheet that's folding, but it does, and we've talked about this with respect to the Metabrain models. We have these Metabrain models where we have these different layers of representations. And it's not just enough to have different layers. You want to have different layers that are organized geometrically with respect to one another. Because in these Metabrain models, you have like different models. Like you might have a representation free model here, it's like a neural network, and you might have a symbolic model here, which is a symbolic network here, which has a different level of representation. But you have to map between these two layers in some way. And so it's one thing to have like, layers that are kind of like in serial here, where you have different layers that have connections. It's another thing to have like different geometric relationships. So these three layers might be organized like this. See, now you have a symbolic network, a semi-symbolic network, and a neural network. These are three different layers of representation. Now there's communication between them, but you have much different sets of, so like in this symbolic network, you have different ways to access this semi-symbolic network, either through this side or through this side, and it's a different part of the network topology. Now you also have a direct connection with the lowest level of representation, and you have connections between these two parts. And so as you fold these over, and they form different types of geometric relationships with one another, you get these different opportunities to interact with different parts of the network. And then if you take these layers and you fold them up further, you can change the adjacency matrix within a single layer or a single point of representation, and that can change the function of these networks as well. So you can fold this neural network over like this instead of just as a square, and then maybe embed the symbolic network into it. Well, that changes the adjacency matrix of this network, but also the entry points to this layer, and it connects to different parts of this network. So it's kind of an interesting set of relationships. I'm not really sure where that would go, but it would add a lot of complexity to your AI models, but also into the biological models of brain organoids. So definitely we should go through this channel more. There's a lot of good stuff in here. Some of it's closely related to brain organoids, some of it's not. But that's the way we want to sort it out. This one actually is interesting. In vitro neurons learn and exhibit sentience when embodied in a simulated game world. This is actually where they're using networks of neurons to drive a video game. And this is something that it looks like this is what they call dish brain. This is something that's actually been around for many years. There was a paper about 20 years ago where they had a small dish of neurons where they connected a microelectrode array to it, or they grew it up in a microelectrode array. And they basically trained the network. These are just neurons that they culture in this array, and then they let connections grow between the neurons. And then they measure the electrical activity of the network. And they were actually able to train it to fly a plane. In this case, they use this approach called dish brain, which is basically the same thing. And they can drive it. In this case, they're playing the arcade game Pong. And so this is a nice example of this type of work. It's basically they're taking these neural cultures, they're letting them grow connections, they're recording the neural activity in different, they don't roll it not from different individual neurons, but from different parts of this network. And then they're able to map it to some output signal. So the output signal might be to, move left or move right. And they can decode, given, stimulation based on the state of the simulation, like based on the state of the Pong game. If you have the ball going in one direction, you would map to those neurons. You would stimulate parts of the network, and then the network would respond. And through, some trial and error, you can get it to learn these basic signals. So they've done this in brain-machine interfaces, but also in these neural cultures. So I think this is a nice paper, and there's actually a literature on this, which is why I bring this up. I don't know how many papers are in the literature, but people have been doing this for a while. I think there's also another paper in Virtual Reality Neurotech in this channel, where they talk about neural interfaces, how you can make makeshift neural interfaces, and brain-controlled bionic hands, which is another article from Physiological Review. So there may actually be an interesting theme here within this channel on sort of neural control and controlling things like video games or prosthetics with these neural signals and growing them up in culture. You can do a lot of things in culture. You can record from human brains. There are a lot of ways to do this, but this is something I think where there's a nice synergy between different channels in the Slack. So, I don't know if you had any questions about that. Let's see. Where is there a question mark? Did we have any questions about that, or?
I mean, that was good to me. I didn't quite know. I think it was Ankit who said that I missed something, but I didn't know what they were referring to.
Oh.
But yeah, that was pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is just food for thought. I don't, and we'll have the recording later. So, the last thing I wanted to talk about today was so in the AI ethics project, Gsoc project, I mentioned something about causal loop diagrams. And so this is something that, we could, and this doesn't have to be for this AI ethics project. This is something I found, thinking back to Krishna's talk on the feedback and regulation and all that. It would be nice if we could kind of work out this sort of idea. We talk about the overhead regulator theorem, and then we're talking about feedback that modifies ethics and behavior. And there's this idea of the ethical regulator that Rob has talked about in his readings, where you use the overhead regulator theorem from cybernetics to sort of regulate ethical behavior. And so there's a author whose name is Ashby. It's not Ross Ashby. It's a different Ashby that is written about this. Yeah, I think Jesse knows what I'm talking about. And so, this might be a good theme to follow up in this project, is to say, we can actually maybe regulate ethics or, promote ethical behavior through building these kind of feedback mechanisms. But the question is, how do we build a feedback mechanism? And one of the ways we might be able to do this is through two things. One might be like a reinforcement learning model, where you have different policies that can be chosen based on the situation, and then the user would pick maybe a policy. The other would be what they call causal loop diagrams, and that's what I'm going to talk about in the last few minutes. So this is an area, actually, it's from public health and sociology, and there are a number of other areas where they use these. And it's a different way of thinking about regulation and cybernetic regulation. They don't talk about it as cybernetics. They talk about it as causal loop diagrams. And so this actually captures a lot of the feedback structure. A causal loop diagram consists of variables connected by arrows, denoting the causal influences among the variables. The important feedback loops are also identified. Variables are related by causal links, shown by arrows. But critically here, each causal link is assigned a polarity. It's either positive or negative, to indicate how the dependent variable changes when the independent variable changes. So what does that mean? So let's take this example here. This is actually an example from, I think, ecology, where you're interested in population fluctuations. And in this case, you have a couple of states. So your independent variable here is population, which is the current state of the population, the current size of the population. Then there's this feedback here, or this connection, causal link to birth rate, and that's denoted by a plus sign, which is positive. So the current population contributes to the birth rate. The larger your population, the more individuals can produce offspring. Although we know that the birth rate fluctuates given a number of factors, but it's basically a positive thing. So if we have more population, we can have a birth rate that's the same over time, but it increases the size of the population. So you also have this fractional birth rate, which is a different way of looking at population size and the sort of the rate of population growth. That has also a positive mark. And then there's also a feedback from birth rate back to population, which is also positive. So this can be a self-reinforcing loop. As the population grows and the birth rate stays the same, you get a larger population, but you also your birth rate can increase, and that increases the population even more. Okay. and then fractional birth rate fits into that. So you see that like causality is kind of weird here because population causes birth rate, but birth rate also causes positive, increase in the population. It's positive feedback, but it's also circular causality. But then you also have, in addition to that, you have this death rate, which is that the population can lead to a death rate. And if the conditions are right, the more population have, the more death you can have, and the higher your death rate possibly. The average lifetime plays into this because if the lifetime is shorter, the average death, the amount of death that you see at any given time can increase just because, there are more individuals expiring. Then the death rate feeds back to the population in a negative way because it takes away from the population instead of adding to it. So again, you have this causal loop where there's reciprocal causality. And so you have this from both sides. And so population then doesn't just become like an example of this independent variable driving a dependent variable like you would see in like a simple cause and effect relationship. You have these multiple loops of sort of reinforcing behaviors or reinforcing processes. So this link polarity is where it can increase the what they call the dependent variable, which is birth rate. But of course, then birth rate becomes the independent variable when talking about its effect on population, which then becomes the dependent variable. So you get this, like if you think of this in terms of a bivariate graph, the population and birth rate have their, the population is on one axis, the birth rate is on another axis, but if you look at the feedback, it's flipped, and you get this feedback that, you have this reciprocal relationship. And you have to plot that in different ways. So that's basically the idea here. And there's some papers that I found on it where they kind of lay out this idea. There's dynamical systems game theory, a new approach to the problem of the social dilemma. And this is about like cooperation and selfish individuals. They talk about a variation of game theory, which is the lumberjack's dilemma. And they kind of propose this approach called dynamical systems game theory. So they propose this dynamical systems game theory, and then they kind of play through these sort of scenarios. The lumberjack's dilemma game is a variant to the prisoner's dilemma, but it really does play on these concepts of reciprocal feedback. So that's one way that it can be applied. Another way it can be applied is found in this paper here on Tragedy of the Commons, where you have this common resource for a community. People will use the resource, but it relies on people to maintain the resource as well. And so actually this is something we talked about with Aaron, where there's this thing in open source where you have a resource that's built that you open up and people will use it. But then the question is, do you get people contributing back to it? Sometimes you get people contributing back just with code. Sometimes they will just contribute back but never like join the project to maintain it. And so the project can grow out of date. There can be a lot of issues in open source with coordinating this sort of maintenance of the commons. And, this involves, again, reciprocal feedback. You have, a situation sometimes where people draw from the common resource so much and never, and basically engage in selfish behavior such that it never gets maintained. And so in open source, that can be a bad situation because these projects age, they don't get updated, they don't get maintained, and then it dies. But maybe people become reliant on it for their projects, for their hardware. And so that's bad. And we want to be able to drive maintenance, not just use. And so that's something that we could visit in the context of AI ethics or a general ethical framework. Another thing is this actually. So that's actually related to something that I was talking about with Aaron with respect to Tragedy of the Commons. And there's actually a lot of literature on this with Tragedy of the Commons and then critiques of that idea where people say, no, collective action actually is a matter of cultural norms, and actually it's much more common I mean, it's just as common as the tragedy of the commons. People will act collectively for their collective interests, just as much as they'll act in self-interest. So we need to reevaluate some of these ideas. And this is something from Boyd and Richardson, who are cultural evolutionists who talk about this problem of collective action and coordinating it. And so this all has a relationship to open source. We might revisit this with respect to this project. Finally, there's these guidelines for drawing causal loop diagrams. And so they kind of talk about how to do this in different ways. This is actually a nice primer on systems, sort of laying out systems and how to pick boundaries for systems and how to pick your variables for looking at different phenomena that have feedback in other relationships. So, you pick your variables, you pick your system boundary, then you figure out how they're related to one another. You figure out what the feedbacks look like, and then you can look at these kind of relationships. So you go from like a simple cause and effect, independent variable to dependent variable relationship, and then you go to these loops that exist where, one thing is dependent on another, but then there's a reciprocal relationship, and you have all of these different things going on in your system. So you get a lot of complexity. But the lesson here is that there are techniques we can use to uncover this complexity and then write a program that would allow us to explore this in, say, maybe an open source context. I mean, I've been thinking maybe that's a way to go about this. Our approach to AI ethics is applying it to open source and saying, we want to look at how do we get people to cooperate in open source? How do we get people to, say, maintain things or to, make the project better? You can just put stuff out there for free or, open it up, but it also needs this involvement of people in a community. So how do we drive this? And it's an ethical issue, of course, because, with what Aaron is talking about with Log4j, that's a issue where we need to have people make sure that the code is maintained so it's not vulnerable to these sorts of things. So I want to talk about that more when Aaron's here, but I think we've covered a lot today, so that's all I have for today. You had something to talk
No, that
about?
was good. Please share that somewhere in Slack, that collection of folders and stuff. That's good. I have a lot to think about in terms of that, and I'm thinking a lot about some related things, and even some lab management things about how to structure some of our task views. It's on my mind, but it's a good meeting. It's good to see everyone again here again today.
Yeah, thanks for
And
attending.
a lot of people again are involved in stuff that aren't in the meeting, so I'm kind of thinking about them too. But it's good to get started here this year.
Yeah, I'm glad to see people again, and if you're welcome to join the meetings whenever, or talk on Slack, or we have our different modes of communication. And I think one of the things for the onboarding guide is to lay out those modes of communication, lay out what tools you might use to do that, and then people know kind of what we want to do, how we're going to do it in tools, and how they can interact, and how that's going to get recognized. So, if you can't come to the meetings, you can still participate in Slack and so forth. And so,
Yes.
yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for attending.